My name is Kex9, and I've seen things that would make a Vorthan wet themselves. I've witnessed entire star systems burn, watched civilizations crumble like stale breadcrumbs, and survived battles that turned space itself into a graveyard. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I saw a human do on Kepler 442 billion. Let me set the stage for you. The Galactic Council had been at war with the Ravager Horde for 3 standard cycles. These weren't your typical space pirates or territorial expansionists. Oh no. The Ravagers were something far worse. They consumed everything in their path, turning entire worlds into barren husks, enslaving populations, and leaving behind nothing but death and despair. The coalition forces were losing. Badly. I was part of the 43rd Mixed Species Battalion, stationed on what the humans called Kepler 442 billion. Terrible name, really. We Keltharians would have called it something poetic like the Emerald of the Void or Sanctuary of the Twin Suns. But humans? They slapped numbers on everything like they're organizing their sock drawers. Our unit consisted of 12 species. Keltharians like myself, naturally superior in tactical analysis, Vorthans with their incredible strength, Cephirians who could phase through solid matter, crystalline beings called the Luxari who could manipulate light itself, and then there were the humans. Humans were odd. Commander Alexis Kane was our human representative, a woman who stood barely 5.5 feet tall but carried herself like she owned the entire galaxy. Her second in command was Marcus Reed, a mountain of a man who spoke softly but could apparently bend steel with his bare hands. The third human was Dr. Elena Vasquez, their medic and scientist, who had this annoying habit of explaining everything in excruciating detail. Why do they always volunteer for the most dangerous missions? I asked this, my Vorthan bunkmate, one evening as we watched Reed single-handedly move supply crates that required 3 of us to lift. This is shrugged, his forearms gesturing dismissively. Death wish, probably. Their species only lives 80 cycles on average. Maybe they're in a hurry. We laughed at that. How naive we were. The attack came without warning. The Ravagers had somehow bypassed our orbital defenses, their massive dreadnoughts descending from the cloud cover like metallic vultures. The sky turned black with their ships, and the ground shook as they began their assault. All units, fall back to evacuation point Alpha. Commander Kane's voice crackled through our communication devices. This is not a drill. Repeat, fall back to Alpha. What followed was pure mayhem. The Ravagers deployed their shock troops, 12-foot-tall monstrosities with 4 arms and skin like living armor. They moved with terrifying coordination, cutting through our defensive lines like they were made of paper. I was running, my 3 hearts beating so fast I thought they might explode when I heard it. A sound that would haunt my dreams for cycles to come. The unmistakable roar of a Ravager warlord. These creatures were legends of terror, standing 20 feet tall, with razor-sharp claws that could slice through battleship hull plating. They were the Ravager's ultimate weapon. I'd never seen one in person, and frankly, I'd hoped to keep it that way. The beast had cornered a group of wounded soldiers near the medical bay. Among them was young Pip, a Zephyrian scout who couldn't have been more than 15 cycles old. His phasing ability wasn't working, probably due to the fear, and he was trapped. Everyone was running. Everyone. Well, almost everyone. Marcus Reed stood between the warlord and the wounded soldiers, armed with nothing but a standard plasma rifle and what appeared to be a complete disregard for his own mortality. Reed, what are you doing? Kane's voice shouted over the communication channel. Get out of there. Negative, Commander, Reed replied, his voice calm as if he were discussing the weather. Got wounded here who can't move. Someone needs to buy them time. The warlord roared again, a sound that made my bones vibrate. It stood there, studying this tiny human who dared to challenge it. If I didn't know better, I'd say the creature looked amused. Reed, that's a direct order. Fall back now. Sorry, Commander. Connection's getting fuzzy. Can't quite make out what you're saying. I watched from my hiding spot behind an overturned transport as Reed opened fire. His plasma bolts struck the warlord's chest, leaving small scorch marks on its natural armor. The creature barely flinched. This was suicide. Pure, unadulterated suicide. The warlord charged, moving with surprising speed for something so massive. Reed dove to the side, rolled, and came up firing. The beast's claws missed him by inches, gouging deep furrows in the metal floor where he'd been standing. Is he insane? This whispered beside me. We'd both taken cover in the same spot, watching this impossible scene unfold. Humans don't make sense, I whispered back. Their preservation instincts are clearly malfunctioning. But as we watched, something strange began to happen. Reed wasn't just randomly shooting and dodging. He was leading the warlord away from the wounded soldiers, drawing it deeper into the medical bay. Every movement was calculated, every shot precisely aimed not to kill the creature, but to anger it further. He's hurting it. This breathed in amazement. The human was using the warlord's rage against it, manipulating one of the most dangerous predators in the galaxy like it was a mindless beast. It was brilliant. It was also completely insane. Reed backed into what looked like a dead end, the warlord looming over him with claws raised for the killing blow. That's when the human smiled. Actually smiled. "Hey, ugly," Reed said, his voice carrying clearly across the bay. "Ever wonder why humans build medical facilities with reinforced blast doors?" He pressed something on his wrist device. Emergency containment protocols activated, and blast doors slammed shut on 3 sides of the medical bay, trapping the warlord in a reinforced section designed to contain biological hazards. The creature roared in fury, throwing itself against the barriers, but they held firm. These doors were built to withstand decontamination explosions. Even a warlord couldn't break through them quickly. "Reed, you magnificent maniac." Kane's voice came through the communicator. "How did you know those doors were there?" "Read the base schematics during the briefing. Ma'am, always pays to know your battlefield." While the warlord was occupied trying to claw its way out of the containment area, Reed helped evacuate the wounded. He personally carried young Pip to safety, the Zephyrian barely conscious but alive. "Why?" Pip asked weakly as Reed set him down near the evacuation transport. "Why did you stay?" Reed looked down at the young alien, his expression serious. "Because someone had to. And humans were pretty good at doing stupid things for the right reasons." As our transport lifted off, I watched through the rear viewport as the medical facility exploded. Reed had activated the base's self-destruct sequence, taking out not only the trapped warlord but also 3 Ravager heavy cruisers that had been using the building as a landing zone. The evacuation was a success. We'd lost the planet, but we'd saved over 3,000 lives. Later, as we regrouped on the Fleet Command ship, I found myself standing next to Dr. Vasquez in the observation deck. She was staring out at the stars, unusually quiet. "Your species is broken," I told her bluntly. "Your survival instincts don't function properly." She turned to look at me, and I was surprised to see she was smiling. "You know what, Kex? You're probably right. But here's the thing about broken things. They sometimes work in ways you don't expect." Reed almost died down there. For strangers, for aliens he'd known less than a cycle. "Yeah, he did." She nodded. "And he'd do it again tomorrow if he had to. That's what makes us human, I guess. We're too stupid to know when to quit." I stared at her, trying to process this. But why? What evolutionary advantage could such behavior possibly provide? Dr. Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that would stick with me for the rest of my very long life. "Maybe survival isn't just about keeping yourself alive, Kex. Maybe it's about making sure the right things survive." The next few days were a whirlwind of tactical meetings, supply inventories, and damage assessments. The loss of Kepler 442 billion was a significant blow to our war effort, but the successful evacuation had saved crucial personnel and resources. What bothered me wasn't the tactical situation, it was the humans. I found myself studying them obsessively, trying to understand what made them tick. Commander Kane would spend hours reviewing battle footage, not to celebrate victories but to analyze every mistake, every moment where someone could have been saved but wasn't. Reed had already volunteered for the next high-risk mission. despite having nearly been shredded by a warlord less than a week ago. And Dr. Vasquez? She was working 18-hour shifts in the medical bay, treating wounded from a dozen different species with equal care. They're fascinating, aren't they? I turned to find Luxari Prime, one of the crystalline beings, standing beside me in the observation deck. Her light-based form shimmered with what I'd learned to recognize as amusement. "They're broken," I replied. "Their risk assessment protocols are completely malfunctioning." "Are they?" Luxari Prime's form shifted, becoming more solid. "Or are they operating on a completely different set of parameters than the rest of us?" Before I could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Red lights flashed, and the intercom crackled to life. "All hands to battle stations. Ravager fleet detected. ETA to engagement. 20 minutes. I felt my 3 hearts sink. We'd been found. The next few hours were a blur of combat preparations. Our fleet was impressive. Don't get me wrong, 47 ships representing the best military technology from 8 different civilizations. But the Ravagers had brought something we'd never seen before. "Sweet mother of stars," someone whispered on the bridge as the enemy fleet came into visual range. It wasn't just the size of their armada, though that was terrifying enough. 238 ships, including 15 of their massive dreadnoughts. No. What made everyone's blood run cold was the ship at the center of their formation. A Ravager world killer. These were theoretical weapons. Things we'd heard whispered about in intelligence reports but never confirmed. Planet crackers. Ships so massive they could literally tear worlds apart from orbit. "Well," Commander Kane said quietly, studying the tactical display, "that's not ideal." Not ideal. The human capacity for understatement was almost as remarkable as their death wish. "Ma'am," came the voice of the fleet's tactical officer, a nervous Ephirian named Quinn. "That world killer. It's charging its primary weapon. Target appears to be the civilian evacuation convoy." My guts turned to ice. The evacuation convoy contained over 50,000 non-combatants, the families, children, the elderly and wounded from dozens of worlds. "Time to weapon discharge?" Kane asked. 47 minutes, assuming standard charging protocols. "And time for the convoy to clear the kill zone? 1 hour. 12 minutes. The mathematics were simple and horrible. The civilians couldn't escape in time. "Options?" Kane asked the bridge crew. Fleet Admiral Vorthak, a grizzled Keltharian veteran, spoke first. "We could engage the enemy fleet directly. Attempt to disable the world killer before it fires. Odds of success? Less than 12%. We're outnumbered 5 to 1. Other options?" Mess. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what the other option was. Nobody wanted to say it out loud. "We could abandon the convoy," Quinn finally whispered. "Escape while the Ravagers are focused on their primary target." Survival probability for the fleet? 73%. Kane stood quietly for a moment, staring at the tactical display. Around her, representatives from 8 different species waited for her decision. As the senior human officer and the architect of the evacuation plan, she had effective command authority. "No," she said finally. "Ma'am?" Admiral Vorthak leaned forward. "I said no. We're not abandoning those people, Commander Kane," Vorthak said carefully. "I understand your emotional attachment, but tactically, we're about to do something incredibly stupid." Kane turned to face the bridge crew, and I saw something in her eyes that made my scales tingle. "We're going to buy those civilians time to escape. The fleet will be annihilated," Quinn protested. "Probably," Kane agreed. "But 50,000 people will live. People with families, with futures, with stories that haven't been told yet." She turned to the communications officer. "Send a fleet-wide message. All ships are to engage the Ravager force at maximum range. Primary objective is to delay the world killer's firing sequence. Secondary objective is to cause as much damage as possible before we're destroyed." "And our escape route?" Admiral Vorthak asked. Kane smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression I'd ever seen on a human face. "What escape route?" As the fleet moved into attack formation, I found myself thinking about Dr. Vasquez's words. Maybe survival isn't just about keeping yourself alive. Maybe it's about making sure the right things survive. 47 ships against 238. A world killer charging its planet-cracking weapon. I can sang. Oh, 50,000 civilians racing against time and physics, and one human commander who decided that some things were worth dying for. The battle was about to begin, and I had the sinking feeling that I was about to witness something that would redefine my understanding of what it meant to be alive in this universe. What happened next will haunt me until my dying breath, which, considering Keltharian lifespans, could be another 400 cycles. The engagement began exactly as predicted. Poorly. Bay, our first wave of attackers, led by the heavy cruiser Stellar Vengeance, they managed to get within firing range of the Ravager formation before being obliterated by concentrated plasma fire. 12 ships, gone in 37 seconds. Well, that went about as expected, Kane muttered, watching the tactical display update. Second wave. You're clear to engage. I have to admire human honesty. Most species would have dressed up the slaughter with fancy military terminology. Tactical repositioning. Strategic withdrawal. The humans just called it what it was, getting blown to pieces. The second wave lasted 41 seconds, 4 more seconds of survival. Progress, I suppose. Ma-am. Communications Officer Yith reported, her Zephyrian voice trembling. The world killer has increased charging speed. New estimate, weapon discharge in 28 minutes, and the convoy still needs 43 minutes to clear the kill zone. The mathematics had gotten worse. Substantially worse. Third wave. Begin your attack run, Kane ordered. Her voice remained steady, but I noticed her hands were clenched behind her back. That's when Dr. Vasquez stepped onto the bridge, carrying what looked like a modified medical scanner and wearing an expression I'd never seen before. Determination mixed with something that might have been excitement. Alexis, I need to talk to you. Privately. Kane glanced at the tactical display, where our third wave was being systematically dismantled. Elena, unless you've invented a miracle cure for being outnumbered 5-1, now's not the time. Actually, Vasquez said, holding up her device, that's exactly what I've done. The bridge fell silent except for the steady stream of damage reports from the dying third wave. Explain. Quickly, Vasquez activated her scanner, and a 3-dimensional projection appeared above the device. It showed the world killer in perfect detail, including internal structures that should have been impossible to detect. I've been analyzing the Ravager bioships since we first encountered them, she said rapidly. Everyone assumed they were purely mechanical constructs with biological components. We were wrong. They're living creatures, highly modified, cybernetically enhanced, but fundamentally biological. So? Admiral Vorthak interrupted. What difference does that make? We still can't penetrate their defenses. Vasquez smiled. And suddenly I understood why humans were so terrifying. It makes all the difference. Because biological systems have biological vulnerabilities. She manipulated the projection, zooming in on a section of the world killer's hull. This isn't armor plating. It's modified carapace, and like all biological carapaces, it has to be permeable to allow for gas exchange and waste removal. You're talking about biological warfare, Kane said quietly. I'm talking about a targeted virus, something that attacks the specific cellular structures the Ravagers use to bond organic components with mechanical ones. Without that bonding agent, their ships literally fall apart. The bridge erupted in excited chatter from multiple species, but Kane held up her hand for silence. Deployment method. Bid, that's the problem. Vasquez's expression sobered. The virus has to be introduced directly into the creature's bloodstream. Someone would need to get inside the world killer and inject it manually. Suicide mission. Reed's voice came from behind us. I hadn't noticed him enter the bridge. Completely, Vasquez agreed. The person doing the injection would have maybe 10 minutes before the organism's immune system killed them. Even with full environmental protection. Kane studied the projection for a long moment. Odds of successfully infiltrating the world killer? With our current resources, maybe 15%, and that's assuming we can get someone inside without being detected. And if the virus works, the entire Ravager fleet dies. All of it. Their ships are all biologically integrated to some degree. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. The humans were actually considering this. "I'll do it," Reed said immediately. "Like hell you will." Kane shot back. "I'm senior officer. If anyone's going on this mission, it's me. With respect, Commander, I'm better suited for infiltration work. You're also our best close-quarters combat specialist. We need you alive." Dr. Vasquez cleared her throat. "Actually, there's a third option. I go." Both Kane and Reed stared at her like she'd suggested juggling plasma grenades. "Elena, you're not a combat operative," Kane said gently. "No, but I'm the only one who fully understands the virus. If something goes wrong with the deployment, I'm the only one who can adapt on the fly." She paused. "Besides, I designed the delivery system. I know exactly where and how to inject it for maximum effectiveness." The argument that followed was brief but intense. In the end, it came down to simple logic. In Mokanjad, Case, Vasquez was right. She was the only one qualified to ensure the mission's success. "Fine," Kane said finally. "But you're not going alone. Reed, you'll escort her to the injection point." "Ma am. That's just sending 2 people to die instead of 1. "Reed, that's an order." While they planned the infiltration, I found myself staring out at the battle raging beyond our hull. The 4th wave had lasted almost 2 whole minutes before being annihilated. We were down to 18 ships. Hex. This appeared beside me, all 4 of his arms fidgeting nervously. "Do you think this plan will work? Honestly? No, it's insane. The odds are astronomical, the risks are suicidal, and it depends entirely on Ravager biology working exactly the way Vasquez thinks it does. Then why do the humans seem so confident?" I watched Kane and Reed coordinating with the infiltration team, their movements efficient and purposeful, despite the impossible nature of their mission. "Because," I said slowly, "I don't think humans calculate odds the same way we do. We look at a 15% chance of success and see failure. They look at it and see possibility." The infiltration began with what the humans called a fight. Our remaining ships launched a coordinated assault on the World Killer's port side, drawing defensive fire and attention while a single stealth shuttle approached from the opposite direction. I watched from the bridge as Reed and Vasquez's shuttle disappeared into the massive creature's docking bay. The ship was so enormous that their tiny vessel looked like a parasite attaching to a leviathan. "Infiltration team. Report status." Kane spoke into her communicator. "We're inside." Reed's voice crackled back, and Elena was right. "This thing is definitely alive. The walls are breathing. Gross, but useful. Can you locate the injection point?" Following Vasquez's bioscanner. "She says we need to reach something called the primary circulatory nexus. Apparently it's about half a mile through what she's calling the digestive processing center." "They have to travel through the creature's stomach?" Quinn asked, looking nauseous. "Worse," came Vasquez's voice. "We have to travel through its secondary stomach, the one it uses to break down metal." Even I shuddered at that. The Ravagers were known to consume starships whole, digesting both organic crews and inorganic materials. The acid levels in those chambers could dissolve hull plating in minutes. For 23 minutes, we listened to Reed and Vasquez navigate through the living hell of the World Killer's interior. Acid pools that could melt through their environmental suits. Immune system responses that manifested as living antibodies the size of shuttlecraft. Digestive processes that created toxic gas clouds capable of killing them, even through their protective gear. And through it all, they kept moving forward. "Injection point located," Vasquez finally reported. "It's bigger than I expected." "How much bigger?" Kane asked. "Well, my calculations were based on normal biological proportions. This thing's primary heart is about the size of our ship's engine room." "Can you still deploy the virus?" "Yes, but I'll need to get much closer to the arterial wall than planned. The injection system won't penetrate from this distance." There was a pause, then Reed's voice. "Elena, that puts you right in the bloodstream." "I know." The current will sweep you away. Even if the virus works, you won't make it back. I know that too. Another pause. Longer this time. Reed? Kane's voice was carefully controlled. I'm thinking. Am. Give me a minute. What happened next became legend throughout the fleet. Reed had found a solution, but it required him to anchor himself to the arterial wall and lower Vasquez directly into the bloodstream on a tether made from their own safety cables. If this goes wrong, Reed told her, I won't be able to pull you back up. If this goes wrong, it won't matter, Vasquez replied. The entire fleet dies in 15 minutes anyway. They made the injection. I was monitoring the tactical display when it happened. One moment, the World Killer was charging its planet-cracking weapon, energy readings climbing toward critical discharge levels. The next moment, every single bio reading from the massive creature flatlined. What the hell? Kane breathed. The World Killer shuddered. Then it began to fall apart. It wasn't explosive or dramatic. It was actually rather anticlimactic. The organic components simply disconnected. Massive sections of hull plating drifted away like shed skin. Weapon systems went dark. The entire superstructure began to collapse in on itself as the biological framework that held it together dissolved, and then the virus spread. Ship after ship in the Ravager fleet began experiencing the same systematic failure. Bio-integrated components separated from mechanical ones. Living armor became dead tissue. Organic weapon systems shut down permanently. In 17 minutes, the most powerful enemy fleet in recorded galactic history became space debris. Infiltration team, report status, Kane called out. Silence. Reed, Vasquez, please respond. More silence. Yesting missed. I found myself holding my breath, something I'd never done during combat before. Around the bridge, representatives from 8 different species waited for word from 2 humans who had just saved the galaxy. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Reed's voice crackled through the communicator. We're alive. Barely. Elena's unconscious, but she's breathing. The virus worked better than expected. This thing is completely dead. The cheers that erupted from the bridge could probably be heard on the next system over. But Reed wasn't finished. Commander, we've got a problem. The creature's death throes damaged our shuttle. We're trapped inside this thing until someone can cut us out. Already on it, Kane replied. Rescue shuttles are inbound. Sit tight. Not planning on going anywhere, am. Oh, and Commander. Yes? Elena wants you to know that she's already working on a broader spectrum version of the virus. She thinks we can modify it to work against Ravager ground forces too. I stared at the communication panel in disbelief. The woman had just survived being lowered into the bloodstream of a planet-sized monster, was currently trapped inside its corpse, and she was already thinking about the next battle. Humans were definitely broken. The rescue took 6 hours. When they finally extracted Reed and Vasquez from the World Killer's carcass, both were suffering from severe radiation exposure, acid burns, and what the medical team classified as extensive biological contamination. They were also smiling. So I asked Vasquez as she recovered in the medical bay, was it worth it? She looked at me with those strange human eyes, still bright despite everything she'd been through. 50,000 people are alive because of what we did today. Their children will grow up. Their stories will continue. Their civilizations will endure. She paused, wincing as the medical scanners worked on her injuries. Yeah, Kex. It was worth it. 3 days later, as our combined fleet helped coordinate the evacuation of Ravager-occupied territories, I found myself back in the observation deck. The stars looked different somehow. Brighter, maybe. Or perhaps I was just seeing them through human eyes. You know, this said, joining me at the viewport. I think I'm beginning to understand them. The humans? The humans? Yeah. They don't calculate survival the same way we do. For us, survival means staying alive. For them, survival means making sure the right things stay alive. I nodded, thinking about everything I'd witnessed. Reed standing against a warlord to save strangers, Kane sacrificing an entire fleet to protect civilians, Vasquez injecting herself into a monster's bloodstream to save the galaxy. They're still broken. I said finally. Yeah, this agreed. But maybe broken in all the right ways. As I watched the rescue operations continue, coordinated by humans who treated every saved life like a personal victory, I realized something profound. The Ravagers had been wrong about one thing. They thought they were the ultimate predators, the apex of survival instinct. But they'd never encountered anything like humanity's greatest weapon, the willingness to die for people they'd never met, for futures they'd never see, for principles that mattered more than their own existence. The galaxy was safe, not because we'd found better weapons or stronger defenses, but because 3 humans had decided that some things were worth more than their own lives. And somehow, in a universe that often seemed cold and uncaring, that made all the difference. The war wasn't over. There would be other battles, other threats, other impossible odds to face. But for the first time since this conflict began, I felt something I hadn't experienced in cycles. Because now I knew what humans were really capable of when they decided to stay behind.